The silence was the first thing that hit me. Not the quiet of an empty house in the middle of a weekday, but a hollow, intentional silence. The kind that sucks the air out of a room. My name is Laurel. I'm 36 years old, and for the last 15 years, I've been the perfect wife to my husband, Kyle, who is 38. I've also been the perfect mother to our son, Stefan, who is 10, and the perfect daughter-in-law to Kyle's mother, Alexandra. I hosted the perfect parties, kept the perfect home, and smiled the perfect smile, all while they cultivated the image of me as a charming but slightly helpless dependent. It was a role I played beautifully. I'd just come from a 2-hour coffee meeting downtown, a routine I'd established years ago. Kyle thought I met with other stay-at-home moms to gossip. He never asked for details. Today, the house felt wrong. Stefan's backpack wasn't by the door where he always dropped it after school. Kyle's car, the one he only drove on weekends, was gone from the garage. I walked into our master bedroom and my breath caught. His side of the closet was bare. Hangers hung in neat, empty rows. His drawers were open and vacant. Panic tried to claw its way up my throat, but I shoved it down. Panic is a luxury. I walked back to the kitchen, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors. There, on the gleaming granite island, was a single piece of Alexandra's ridiculously expensive cream-colored stationery. A dark, circular coffee stain marred the bottom corner, a mark of casual disrespect. The note was written in my mother-in-law's perfect, looping cursive. It was short. Laurel. Kyle has started a new chapter. We feel it's for the best. A good wife shouldn't need money of her own, so we've taken steps to simplify your transition. You'll find $12 in the cookie jar for coffee. Regards. Alexandra and Kyle. $12. For 15 years of my life. I walked over to the ceramic cookie jar, the one Stefan and I had painted together when he was 5, and lifted the lid. Inside, next to a few stale chocolate chip cookies, was a $10 bill and 2 ones. They hadn't even bothered to get the amount right. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw the cookie jar against the wall, though the thought was tempting. I simply folded the note, slid it into my pocket, and went to my phone to check our joint savings account. The balance read, 12 47. They'd cleaned it out. Every last cent I thought we had. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it wash over me. The condescension. The assumption that I would crumble, that I would be a helpless victim with no resources and nowhere to go. They had written me out of my own life and left me with pocket change. Then, a slow, quiet smirk spread across my face. I walked into my home office, a small room Kyle called my hobby space, and sat down at my desk. I woke up my laptop, ignoring the family photo of the 3 of us smiling on a beach that served as the screensaver. I clicked past it, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I opened a secure, encrypted drive, one that didn't sync to any cloud, and navigated to a folder hidden 3 layers deep. The folder was labeled simply, Assets. I opened a file, a consolidated balance sheet that was updated weekly. For the last 7 years, while playing the part of the perfect non-working wife, I've been secretly building a boutique online marketing consultancy. I handle crisis PR and brand rehabilitation for high-profile tech clients who value discretion above all else. My little hobby was currently clearing more in a good quarter than my husband made in a year from his cushy corporate VP job. The company, legally shielded behind 2 shell corporations and registered in another state, was worth more than every asset Kyle and his mother thought they had. They left me with $12. My business account, the one they knew nothing about, held just over 1.4 million. My laptop pinged with a new email notification. It was from Cassandra, my best friend of 20 years and my silent business partner. She was the only one who knew the whole truth. The subject line was a single word. Now? I opened it. The body of the email was just as brief. Ready to go nuclear? I took a deep breath. the first truly clean one I'd taken all day, and typed my reply. Light the match. My phone buzzed less than a minute after I hit send. Cassandra's name lit up the screen. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Tell me you're out of that house," she said, her voice a low growl. No hello, no preamble. That was Cassandra. "Not yet. I just walked in an hour ago." "Laurel, you need to call a lawyer. Now. I have Botran's number ready. He's the best, and he's discreet." "Then you pack a bag and you come here." "I will," I said calmly, my eyes scanning the empty picture frames on the wall where our wedding photos used to be. They'd even taken those. "But not in that order. First, we stick to the plan." "The plan was for a managed, civilized separation," she shot back. "The plan did not involve them looting the accounts and leaving you with $12 and a passive-aggressive piece of stationery." "This is a declaration of war." I couldn't help but let out a short, dry laugh. "I know, and they think they just launched a surprise attack. They have no idea I've had my cannons aimed at their ship for years." For 15 years, I had smiled. I smiled through Alexandra's backhanded compliments about how I'd done so well for a girl with no family money. I smiled when Kyle's business partners would ask what I did, and he'd answer for me. "Laurel's focus is our family," patting my hand as if I were a prized pet. I smiled through every single holiday, fundraiser, and corporate dinner I planned and executed flawlessly, only to have Alexandra take the credit. I remembered one Christmas about 5 years ago. I'd spent weeks preparing. Kyle was up for a big promotion. I'd curated the guest list, designed the menu, and charmed every single board member. At the end of the night, with everyone raising a glass, Alexandra had stood up and said, "I'm so glad my son has a wife who knows her place is to support his success." It wasn't a compliment. It was a boundary. A reminder of the box they'd put me in. Cassandra was the only one who saw the steel behind the smile. "You let them do it, Laure," she said, her voice softening slightly. "You let them build this narrative that you were just a pretty accessory." "It was the perfect cover," I replied, pulling up the banking portal on my laptop. "I let them think I was a bird in a gilded cage. They never bothered to check if I was the one who built the cage. They wanted a dependent, so I gave them one. It made them comfortable. It made them careless. Well, they're about to get very uncomfortable," she said. "What's the first move?" "The first move is to play the part they've assigned me," I said, my fingers clicking as I logged into the main account portal. "I'm going to be the distraught, abandoned wife. I'll call Kyle, crying. I'll call his brother Julius, confused and scared. I'll let Alexandra think she's won. While they're busy celebrating, I'll be gathering every last piece of evidence I need to dismantle them. And Stefan?" My breath hitched. They have him. For now. But that's the leverage that will make them move recklessly. They'll use him to try and control me, and in doing so, they'll show their hand. "Okay," Cassandra said, a reluctant agreement in her tone. "Play your part. But I'm sending you Bo's contact info. Call him tomorrow. Get the clock started." "I will. Talk soon." I hung up and turned my full attention to the screen. The joint savings account was empty, as expected. The checking account was the same. But I wasn't looking at the balances. I was looking at the transaction history, going back a full year. I needed to see where the money went. Most of it had been transferred out that morning, a single wire to an account I didn't recognize. A corporate account by the name. Easy enough to trace. But as I scrolled back, my eyes caught something else. An anomaly. 6 months ago. A wire transfer for $50,000. It wasn't a business payment. It wasn't a transfer to family. It was a personal wire, authorized by Kyle, from our savings. I clicked on the transaction details, my heart starting to beat a little faster. The recipient was a name I had never heard before, Talia Cox. The next morning I began my performance. I called Kyle's phone. It went straight to voicemail as I knew it would. I left a message, carefully pitching my voice to sound shaky and tearful, begging him to just tell me what was going on. Then I called his brother, Julius. He answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. I played the part of the confused, heartbroken wife perfectly, telling him I came home to an empty house and a cruel note. He sounded genuinely shocked, promising to find out what was happening. He was a passive man, but not a malicious one. I knew he was a pawn, not a player. My real target was his wife, Paige. I knew she did her grocery shopping on Tuesday mornings at the upscale market a few towns over, the one Alexandra preferred. I put on a pair of old jeans and a faded sweatshirt, skipped makeup, and drove there. I found her in the produce section, looking stressed as she tried to pick out an avocado. I walked up to her, making my eyes look wide and lost. "Paige?" She turned, and her face fell with pity when she saw me. "Laurel. Oh my God. Julius just called me. Are you okay?" "I don't know," I whispered, letting a tear slip down my cheek. I was rather proud of that touch. "I don't understand any of this." "They took everything, even Stefan." She reached out and squeezed my arm. Paige, at 33, had been in the Thornton family for a decade, and I knew for a fact that Alexandra treated her with the same subtle disdain she'd always shown me. We weren't from the right families, the right money. We were outsiders who had married in. "Let's get coffee," she said, her voice firm as she abandoned her shopping cart. "My treat." We sat in a corner booth at the cafe next door. I let her lead the conversation, just nodding and dabbing at my eyes with a napkin. "It's Alexandra," Paige finally said, her voice low and angry. "This has her fingerprints all over it. The note, the cruelty of it. That's her. Kyle is weak. He does whatever she says." She leaned in closer. "I've been trying to get Julius to see it for years. She manipulates everything. Our finances, our vacations, even what preschool we chose for our kids. She has to be in control." I looked at her, my expression one of pure, wounded innocence. "But the money, our joint savings, how could they just take it?" Paige hesitated, chewing on her lower lip. She looked around as if Alexandra herself might be listening. "Laurel, you have to be careful. They hide things." 6 or 7 years ago, Alexandra had Julius sign some papers. She said it was for a small investment property, a tax write-off for the family. But I saw the bank statements later by accident. The down payment came from one of your and Kyle's accounts. The property is in Julius's name, but you and Kyle paid for it. She told Julius it was just a formality to protect family assets. My mind raced, connecting dots. A hidden property, paid for with our money, laundered through his brother. It was cleaner, smarter, and more illegal than I could have imagined. "I didn't know," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "Of course you didn't," she said, squeezing my hand. "That's how she operates. She makes you feel like you're a guest in your own life." The next day, I walked into the downtown office of Beau Tran. Cassandra had been right. He was sharp, level-headed, and his office was minimalist and efficient. He was 45, with a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I didn't cry or play the victim with him. I laid out the facts: the empty house, the drained accounts, the note. I told him about my secret business and showed him my last 2 years of income statements. He listened without interruption, his face unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "They've made a critical mistake," he said. "They underestimated you. And in doing so, they've gotten sloppy. The note from your mother-in-law is a gift. It establishes intent. Draining the joint account is an obvious attempt to hide marital assets." "There's more," I said, and told him what Paige had revealed about the property in Julius's name. Beau's eyebrows shot up. "That moves this from a messy divorce to potential fraud. We'll subpoena every financial document they've touched for the last 10 years. Bank records, brokerage accounts, property deeds. In the meantime, you do nothing. You continue to be the woman they think you are. Let them think you're broken. The more confident they are, the more mistakes they'll make. I left his office feeling a surge of cold, clear power. The plan was in motion. I was driving back to the small apartment I'd rented when my phone buzzed with a message from Cassandra. It wasn't text, it was a series of images. The first was a screenshot from a social media profile belonging to Talia Cox. Her profile picture showed her smiling, wrapped in Kyle's arms. The second was a photo of them clinking champagne glasses on the porch of a beautiful new house. The caption read, "Making a home with my one and only. Just new beginnings." The last image was a screenshot of the public property records for that house. The sale had closed 3 weeks ago. The owners were listed as Kyle Thornton and Talia Cox. Vengeance, I discovered, had its own marketing campaign. While Beautran's office was busy preparing a mountain of subpoenas, I went to work in my own field of expertise. Kyle's professional reputation was his most prized asset, and I knew all its vulnerabilities. I had, after all, helped him build it. Now, I would quietly and methodically tear it down. I started by creating a series of ghost profiles on key industry forums, seeding anonymous but credible-sounding chatter about instability in his company's leadership. I used my skills to disrupt the search engine results for his name, pushing positive articles down and elevating neutral, less flattering ones. Using a VPN and encrypted email, I sent his resume to several of his company's direct competitors, knowing the inquiries back to his HR department would raise questions about his loyalty. It was digital death by 1,000 paper cuts. Within 2 weeks, the pressure started to show. Julius mentioned to Paige during a strained phone call that Kyle was on edge, that a huge potential client had mysteriously pulled out at the last minute. Kyle, of course, blamed the market. A junior associate, anything but the smiling, helpless wife he thought he'd left destitute. He had no idea the calls that were supposed to go to his office were being subtly rerouted through a digital dead end I'd constructed. Then, exactly as I predicted, Alexandra made her move. My phone rang on a Thursday afternoon. Her name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering, taking a deep breath to steady my voice. When I picked up, I made sure it was thick with unshed tears. "Hello?" I whispered. "Laurel, dear," she said, her tone a sickening blend of condescension and feigned concern. "I'm so glad I reached you. We've all been so worried." "Worried?" I asked, my voice cracking on cue. "Of course. This is a difficult time. But I'm calling about Stefan. He needs his routine. Kyle and I think it would be best if you signed the preliminary custody agreement. It just makes things cleaner, and it would give you specified visitation rights. We can have the papers couriered to you." There it was, the leverage. They wanted me to sign away my rights to my son, believing I was too broken and too poor to fight back. I don't have a lawyer, Alexandra," I stammered. "I don't understand any of these things. I was looking at some old financial papers from our safe, and I don't understand them. The ones for Stefan's education fund." I let my voice trail off. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about that," she said smoothly. "That's all taken care of. It's for Stefan's future." This was my moment. I had the call on speaker, a digital recorder running silently on my laptop. "It's just, some of the signatures on the transfer documents, Kyle's signature looks different than usual." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the cogs turning in her arrogant mind. She thought I was a clueless child. "Laurel," she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, patronizing tone. "A family like ours is a complex business. Sometimes a man is too busy to handle every little detail. And sometimes, a mother knows what's best for her son's financial security. A strong woman has to be willing to guide his hand, even guide his own pen, for the good of the family." Kyle understood that. He always does. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice remained steady. So, you signed for him? I ensured the family's assets were protected, she corrected, the steel returning to her voice. That's all you need to know. Now, about those papers. A courier will be there within the hour. She hung up. I sat in silence for a full minute, the recording still running. Guide his own pen. She'd admitted it. She'd confessed to forgery on a recorded line. I saved the file, encrypted it, and immediately sent it to Beautran with a brief one-line email. Call me when you've listened to this. He called back in less than 10 minutes. His voice, usually so calm and measured, had a new, sharp edge to it. Laurel, he said, what your mother-in-law just described, what she just admitted to you on this recording, that's not just a civil matter for a divorce court. She confessed to a felony. This changes everything. Armed with Alexandra's confession, I knew I had to force the next move. I sent a copy of the audio file to Julius. Not to his email, which I was sure his mother monitored, but to a private messaging app he used for his fantasy football league, an account Paige had told me about. I attached a simple message. Your mother is about to take your brother down for felony fraud. You need to decide which side you're on. This is your only chance to protect your own family. The response was faster than I expected. He called me an hour later, his voice strained and low. Where did you get this? She said it to me, Julius. She admitted to forging Kyle's name on documents to move money out of our son's education fund. She's been using you both. My mother would never. He started, but his voice lacked conviction. The recording was undeniable. Wouldn't she? I asked softly. Think about the property in your name, the one I paid for. She told you it was a tax write-off. She lied to you, Julius. She's been using your clean record to hide their dirty money. When this all comes out in court, and it will, you'll be implicated. Do you really want to be part of that? I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, the sound ragged. He wasn't a bad man, just a weak one, conditioned his entire life to follow his mother's lead. I was asking him to break 41 years of programming. What do you want? He finally asked. Access, I said, to the old family trust documents, the ones your father set up before he died. Alexandra has them in the safe at the main house. I know you have a key. He was silent for a long time. Meet me tomorrow, at the public library downtown, 10 a.m. He hung up without saying goodbye. The next morning, Julius looked pale and exhausted. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table without making eye contact. These are copies, he said. I don't want to be involved. You already are, I told him, my voice gentle but firm. But this is how you get uninvolved. Thank you, Julius. I took the envelope straight to Cassandra's apartment. We spread the documents across her dining room table. It was a labyrinth of trusts, sub-trusts, and holding companies, but the breadcrumbs were there. Alexandra hadn't just forged Kyle's signature once. She'd been doing it for years, moving money through shell accounts and using Stefan's education fund as a personal slush fund to inflate Kyle's investment portfolio. It was systematic, arrogant, and deeply illegal. This is the mother lode, Cassandra breathed, pointing to a series of transfers. She's been skimming from the family trust your father-in-law set up for the grandkids. She's literally been stealing from her own grandchildren to fund Kyle's lifestyle. And now we have the paper trail to prove it, I said, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. It's time to stop playing defense. Cassandra grinned, a sharp, predatory expression. My favorite part, the PR attack. We have the narrative, a devoted mother and wife, discarded by a cheating husband and his criminal mother, who not only stole her marital assets, but embezzled from her own son's trust fund. It's a masterpiece of greed and betrayal. By the time I'm done, Alexandra won't be able to get a reservation at a diner, let alone a seat on a charity board. With the financial evidence, the audio confession, and Julius's corroborating documents, I had everything I needed. I called Tran. "We're ready," I said. "I want to schedule a mediation." "A mediation?" he asked, surprised. "Laurel, with this evidence, we could go straight to a judge. We could file criminal charges." "I know," I said, "but that's not the point. I don't just want to win. I want them to sit in a room and watch their entire world burn down around them. I want to see their faces when they realize the good wife they threw away is the one holding the torch." There was a pause on the line. "All right," Bo said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "We'll schedule it. Who do you want present?" "Kyle, obviously, and his lawyer." I took a breath. "And I want Alexandra Thornton there. Not as a guest, not as a support system for her son. I want her named as a co-defendant in the civil fraud claim. I want her sitting at that table, legally bound to answer for what she's done." The mediation was held in a sterile conference room in a downtown high-rise. The air was thick with tension and the smell of expensive bad coffee. Kyle and Alexandra sat on one side of the massive mahogany table, flanking their lawyer, a slick man in a suit that probably cost more than my first car. They both wore expressions of smug confidence. Kyle looked annoyed, as if this were a tedious formality before his inevitable victory. Alexandra looked bored, occasionally inspecting her perfectly manicured nails. They saw me sitting alone with Bo and assumed I was a lamb being led to slaughter. Behind a one-way mirror in an adjacent observation room, Cassandra sat with a notepad, ready to document every reaction. Paige and Julius were waiting in a separate room down the hall, ready to be called. The mediator, a retired judge with a no-nonsense demeanor, started the proceedings. "Mr. Thornton's counsel has submitted a settlement offer," she began, sliding a document across the table. "It offers Mrs. Thornton a one-time payment of $25,000 in exchange for waiving all future claims to marital assets and granting full physical and legal custody of the minor child, Stephen Thornton, to Mr. Thornton." Alexandra smirked. Kyle leaned back in his chair, a conqueror. Bo didn't even glance at the paper. He simply pushed it back across the table. "We reject the offer," he said calmly. "And we have a counter-filing." He produced a thick binder and placed it in front of the mediator. "In this binder, you will find documentation of Mrs. Thornton's personal income for the last 7 years, generated from a consulting business she owns and operates. As you'll see, her average annual income significantly exceeds Mr. Thornton's." Kyle's smirk vanished. He sat bolt upright, his eyes wide with disbelief. Alexandra's perfectly sculpted face tightened. Bo continued, his voice even and relentless. "You will also find a forensic accounting report tracing $50,000 from the couple's joint savings, transferred by Mr. Thornton to a Ms. Talia Cox 6 months ago, which was subsequently used as a down payment on a property they purchased together while still legally married." Kyle went pale. His lawyer started shuffling through his papers, suddenly looking flustered. "Furthermore," Bo said, his eyes locking on Alexandra, "we have evidence of a second property, purchased with marital funds, but held in the name of Mr. Julius Thornton. This constitutes a fraudulent conveyance of a marital asset." Alexandra opened her mouth to speak, but Bo cut her off. "And finally, we have this." He placed a small digital audio player on the table and pressed play. Alexandra's voice filled the silent room, crisp and clear. "A strong woman has to be willing to guide his hand, even guide his own pen, for the good of the family." The color drained from Alexandra's face. She looked like she'd been struck. Kyle stared at his mother, a look of pure, unadulterated panic dawning in his eyes. "That recording," Bo stated, "is Mrs. Alexandra Thornton confessing to felony forgery, admitting to falsifying Mr. Thornton's signature on documents to illegally transfer funds from their son's educational trust." The other lawyer looked at his clients, his jaw slack. Is this true? He whispered, horrified. Before they could answer, Bo gestured to the door. We also have witnesses. Mr. Julius Thornton is prepared to testify that his mother coerced him into putting the fraudulent property in his name, and Mrs. Paige Thornton is prepared to testify about years of financial manipulation she has witnessed. It was a complete rout, an ambush. They had walked in expecting to crush me, to finalize my erasure. Instead, they were sitting in the wreckage of their lives, and they hadn't even seen it coming. The mediator, who had been reading through the first few pages of our filing, looked up. She took off her glasses and looked at Kyle and Alexandra with an expression of profound disappointment. She cleared her throat. Given these new filings, which include evidence of significant hidden assets, fraudulent conveyance, and potential criminal activity, the initial offer is not only rejected but is frankly insulting. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. Based on a preliminary review of the assets Mrs. Thornton has uncovered, she continued, her voice level and final, and accounting for punitive damages related to the fraud, it appears Mrs. Thornton will be awarded no less than 70% of all community assets, including the family home, which will be awarded to her as the primary custodial parent. The fallout was swift and brutal. News doesn't leak in their world, it floods. Cassandra, true to her word, orchestrated the narrative with surgical precision. Anonymous tips, backed by carefully selected, non-incriminating documents, found their way to the right industry bloggers and social columnists. The story wasn't just about a messy divorce. It was about embezzlement, fraud, and a powerful family matriarch stealing from her own grandson. Within a week, Kyle was suspended from his job pending an internal investigation. The client leads he was so proud of had already dried up thanks to my earlier work, but this was a public shaming. His company, obsessed with its public image, couldn't tolerate the stain. Alexandra fared no better. Her exclusive social club, a place where she had reigned as a queen bee for 2 decades, quietly revoked her membership, citing a violation of their ethics clause. The charity board she sat on requested her immediate resignation. The phone calls she made went unanswered. Their world, built on the fragile foundation of reputation, crumbled to dust. 2 weeks after the mediation, armed with a court order granting me temporary exclusive use of the family home, I moved back in. Stefan was with me. The reunion had been quiet, just a long hug in the doorway of my small apartment before we packed his things. He was confused, but he knew he was safe with me. Walking back into that house was surreal. It was legally mine for now, but it felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. I didn't gloat. I didn't redecorate or throw their remaining things onto the lawn. That would have been their style, not mine. My revenge was quieter, more complete. I simply starved them of the one thing they craved above all else: control. I changed the locks. I had their mail forwarded to Alexandra's address. I lived my life, calmly and methodically, in the space they had tried to rip away from me. One afternoon, I did something I hadn't planned. I drove to the new house, the one Kyle had bought with Talia Cox. I found the address from the property records Cassandra had sent me. It was a beautiful home in a new development, the kind of place designed for perfect, happy families. Talia was in the front yard, watering a bed of newly planted flowers. She looked up as I approached, a flicker of recognition and fear in her eyes. She was younger than me, pretty, with a hopeful expression that was already starting to look strained. "You're Laurel," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I replied, my voice even. "I just wanted to see the house my money helped buy." Tears welled in her eyes. "He told me you were already divorced," she whispered. "He said it was finalized months ago, that you were unwell, that you'd moved back to your hometown." I looked at this woman, another victim in the web of Kyle's and Alexandra's lies, and I felt a surprising pang of something that wasn't anger. It was a distant, cold pity. They had used her, just as they had used me, as they had used Julius. She was just another prop for the life Kyle wanted to project. He lied, I said simply. It was all that needed to be said. I could have destroyed her. I could have named her in the divorce proceedings as a homewrecker, dragged her through the mud, and made her life a living hell. But that would have been a chaotic, emotional act. My plan was precise. She wasn't the target. She was just collateral damage. My fight was with the architects of my pain. I smiled, a small, genuine smile of dismissal. "Good luck with him," I said, and walked away, leaving her standing among her flowers in the ruins of the future she thought she had. The final act came a month later. Beautran called me. His voice was grim. "Laurel, the district attorney's office has reviewed the evidence from the mediation, specifically the documents from the family trust and the audio recording." I held my breath. "They've issued a warrant," he said, "for Alexandra Thornton on charges of felony fraud and embezzlement." That evening, I was making dinner for Stefan when I saw the news report on my tablet. It was a short segment, but it was devastating. There was Alexandra, the untouchable matriarch, being led from her mansion in handcuffs. She tried to hide her face from the cameras, but there was no hiding the look of pure, uncomprehending shock as the officer guided her into the back of a police car. The Queen had been deposed. The dust has settled now, but the landscape is forever changed. The divorce was finalized quickly after Alexandra's arrest. Kyle, stripped of his mother's influence and financial backing, was a hollowed-out version of the man I once knew. He didn't fight. He signed everything Beau put in front of him, a ghost in a designer suit. He lost his job, his reputation, and the shiny new life he'd tried to build with Talia. She left him, unsurprisingly, the moment the full scope of his financial ruin became clear. I am financially secure. More than secure. I have the house, sole custody of Stefan, and a business that continues to thrive in the shadows. Alexandra, after a humiliating legal battle, took a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. She's serving 2 years in a low-security federal prison. Julius and Paige moved their family to the West Coast, a quiet exodus from the Thornton name and the wreckage it now represented. We exchanged polite, infrequent texts. They got out, and I'm glad for them. But there's a cost to setting the world on fire, even when the world deserves to burn. Some nights, I sit in the quiet of this big, silent house and feel the weight of what I did. It wasn't just a victory. It was a demolition. I feel an isolation that is sharp and profound. The ruthlessness it took to fight back, to orchestrate their downfall with such cold precision, has left its mark on me. I see it in the mirror sometimes, a hardness in my eyes that wasn't there before. Cassandra came over last week with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. We sat on the back patio, watching the sunset. She's been my rock, my co-conspirator, my conscience when I needed one. "You're thinking about it again," she said, not looking at me. "It was necessary," I said, more to myself than to her. "Everything I did. It was justified." "It was," she agreed, "but necessary things can still be heavy. You fought monsters, Laurel. It's okay to be tired of the dark." She took a sip of her wine. "You know, you should write it all down. Your story. Not for anyone else, just for you. Get it out of your head." She smirked. "Or, post it online for a bunch of strangers to read." "They eat this stuff up." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt foreign and wonderful. The thought is tempting, to lay it all out, anonymously, and let the world see what happens when you push a good woman too far. The other day, Stefan and I were cleaning out the garage. In a dusty box, I found the old ceramic cookie jar we painted together. Tucked inside, forgotten, was the single $10 bill and the 2 ones they had left me. $12. I held the crumpled bills in my hand, the paper soft and worn. It felt like an artifact from another lifetime, a relic of a woman who no longer exists. I started with $12 and no home. Now I own 3 properties, 2 shell companies, and a story no one dares repeat out loud. Funny thing, Karma. You think it's slow, but sometimes she carries your name.